Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother and sister, welcome back to Islamic Notes channel. In Italy, a country known as the center of world Catholicism, an unprecedented phenomenon occurred. Thousands of Italian nuns, who had dedicated their lives to convents for decades, suddenly shook the world with a major decision. They chose to convert to Islam. This decision was no simple one, considering they lived within strong religious traditions, strict monastic discipline, and an environment that had long been devoid of Islamic influence. However, everything changed when a verse of the Quran touched their hearts profoundly, revealing a truth that had been hidden from their sight. The verse reads, "Indeed, the only religion acceptable to Allah is Islam." Quran 3:19. To some, this verse may sound ordinary, but to these thousands of nuns, its words penetrated the darkness like a light. For years, they had sought peace, withdrawing from the world, fasting, praying, and worshiping diligently. But in their hearts, a question remained unanswered. Was the path they were taking truly leading them to the one God? Their first encounter with the Quran began with intellectual fascination. Some nuns studied the Islamic holy book simply for religious research, comparing it with the Bible they had been studying. However, the deeper they read, the stronger the vibrations they felt. The verses of the Quran felt alive, as if they were not mere texts, but the direct words of the Creator. Finally, when they read the verse that the only religion approved by Allah is Islam, their hearts trembled. Tears welled up in their eyes without them realizing it, as if all their prayers and long searching had been answered in that single moment. This news spread quickly among the monasteries in Italy. One by one, the nuns began to express their feelings, sharing similar spiritual experiences. Initially, they feared being labeled apostates by their peers, but the realization that thousands of nuns felt the same gave them courage. They began reading the Quran together, studying Islam in secret, and ultimately deciding to declare their faith. This phenomenon shocked many, especially the Catholic Church, which had long been the center of spiritual authority for the nuns. How could women who should have been the most devout, disciplined, and most faithful to Catholic teachings choose to leave their convents to embrace Islam? The answer is simple. The truth cannot be contained. When the heart finds light, nothing can hold it back. Today, thousands of Italian nuns who have converted to Islam are living a new life as Muslims. They are learning to pray, reading the Quran, wearing the hijab, and experiencing a peace they had never experienced before. Many of them admit that, even though they used to live in the quiet convents, their hearts often felt empty. But after converting to Islam, that emptiness disappeared, replaced by the warming light of faith. This phenomenon is not only a historic milestone for Italy, but also clear evidence that the Quran possesses a power beyond human reason. A single verse can change thousands of hearts, overturn decades of faith, and lead them on the straight path. This story bears witness to the fact that God's guidance comes in unexpected ways, to whomever He wills. Among the thousands of Italian nuns who have converted to Islam, there is one particularly moving story. Her name is Sister Maria Elisabetta, a nun who has dedicated herself to a convent in Rome for over 25 years. She is known as a devout, loving figure and a constant role model for her fellow sisters. From a young age, she chose to leave the worldly life to dedicate herself entirely to God. However, despite her steadfast faith, Maria often felt an emptiness within her. Every time she prayed long prayers in the chapel, she would ask herself, "Have I truly found the right path to God? Why do I still feel empty even though I have dedicated my entire life to Him?" These questions haunted Maria for years, until one day a Muslim researcher from the University of Rome came to Maria's convent to conduct interfaith dialogue. During the meeting, the researcher read several verses from the Quran in Arabic and then translated them into Italian. One of the verses she recited was Allah's statement, "Indeed, the only religion acceptable to Allah is Islam." Surah Ali Imran 19. As the verse was recited, Maria felt something she had never experienced before. The words pierced her heart, making her body tremble. Tears welled up in her eyes uncontrollably. She felt as if Allah were speaking directly to her, answering questions she had kept to herself. That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She pondered the verse she had heard. She began searching for a translation of the Quran in the university library, and reading it silently. The more she read, the more she felt she had found answers she had eluded her during her decades in the monastery. She discovered an explanation of the unity of God, Tawheed, of the prophets she had known since childhood, but now with a clearer and more direct meaning. Several months later, Maria finally made the biggest decision of her life. With a trembling voice, she recited the Shahada before an imam in Rome. "There is no God but Allah, and there is no Muhammadan Rasulullah." She burst into tears. Maria, who had now chosen the new name Mariam, felt a peace she had never felt before in her life. She wore the hijab for the first time with gratitude. "Now I feel truly close to Allah," she said, smiling, tears still streaming down her cheeks. Maria Mariam's story spread quickly among other nuns. Many were inspired by Maria's courage to follow her heart. They began reading the Quran, studying Islam, and eventually joining the mass influx of Italian nuns converting to Islam. This phenomenon shook not only Italy, but the world. How could such a devout senior nun, who had dedicated decades of her life to the convent, choose to abandon everything for the sake of Islam? The answer was simple: Allah's guidance. And that guidance came in just one verse. Among the thousands of Italian nuns who have converted to Islam, there is one particularly moving story. Her name is Sister Maria Elisabetta, a nun who has dedicated herself to a convent in Rome for over 25 years. She is known as a devout, loving figure and a constant role model for her fellow sisters. From a young age, she chose to leave the worldly life to dedicate herself entirely to God. However, despite her steadfast faith, Maria often felt an emptiness within her. Every time she prayed long prayers in the chapel, she would ask herself, "Have I truly found the right path to God? Why do I still feel empty even though I have dedicated my entire life to Him?" These questions haunted Maria for years, until one day a Muslim researcher from the University of Rome came to Maria's convent to conduct interfaith dialogue. During the meeting, the researcher read several verses from the Quran in Arabic and then translated them into Italian. One of the verses she recited was Allah's statement, "Indeed, the only religion acceptable to Allah is Islam." Surah Ali Imran 19. As the verse was recited, Maria felt something she had never experienced before. The words pierced her heart, making her body tremble. Tears welled up in her eyes uncontrollably. She felt as if Allah were speaking directly to her, answering questions she had kept to herself. That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She pondered the verse she had heard. She began searching for a translation of the Quran in the university library and reading it silently. The more she read, the more she felt she had found answers she had eluded her during her decades in the monastery. She discovered an explanation of the unity of God, Tawheed, of the prophets she had known since childhood, but now with a clearer and more direct meaning. Several months later, Maria finally made the biggest decision of her life. With a trembling voice, she recited the Shahada before an imam in Rome. "There is no God but Allah, and there is no Muhammadan Rasulullah." She burst into tears. Maria, who had now chosen the new name Mariam, felt a peace she had never felt before in her life. She wore the hijab for the first time with gratitude. "Now I feel truly close to Allah," she said, smiling, tears still streaming down her cheeks. Maria Mariam's story spread quickly among other nuns. Many were inspired by Maria's courage to follow her heart. They began reading the Quran, studying Islam, and eventually joining the mass influx of Italian nuns converting to Islam. This phenomenon shook not only Italy, but the world. How could such a devout senior nun, who had dedicated decades of her life to the convent, choose to abandon everything for the sake of Islam? The answer was simple: Allah's guidance. And that guidance came in just one verse. After thousands of Italian nuns officially converted to Islam, their lives changed drastically. Some left the convents and chose to live simply among the Muslim community, while others remained in their convents but used them as centers for Islamic study and study. This phenomenon caused quite a stir, as buildings that had once been symbols of Christian silence now resounded with the beautiful recitation of verses from the Quran. The former nuns adapted quickly. They learned to pray 5 times a day, fast during Ramadan, and some even began memorizing verses from the Quran. They discovered a joy they had never felt before. "We used to feel lonely even though we lived together in the convent," said one convert, "but now our hearts are filled with light because Allah is always with us." The social impact of this event was profound. In Italy, the number of converts to Islam increased sharply. Many lay people who had previously been unfamiliar with Islam began to become curious and seek information. Universities held open discussions about the Quran, while the media endlessly discussed how a single verse could shake the faith of thousands of people. In Europe, this phenomenon became a subject of great debate. Some call it a wave of guidance, marking the growth of Islam on the continent, while others call it a challenge to European identity. However, what is undeniable is that Islam is increasingly finding a place in the hearts of many. These convert nuns are now also a global inspiration. They are frequently invited to speak at conferences, mosques, and international forums about their spiritual journeys. Their stories are broadcast on television, radio, and even go viral on social media. Many are touched and ultimately follow in their footsteps and embrace Islam. However, their journey is not always easy. Some face rejection from their families and surrounding communities. Others are ridiculed, and some are even thrown out of their homes. But they face all of this with extraordinary patience. "These difficulties are only small trials," Sister Maria Miriam said in one of her interviews, "because compared to the peace that God gives, all suffering seems light." This phenomenon has also given rise to new communities in Italy and Europe. Communities of converts who support each other. They establish Islamic learning centers, provide temporary housing for displaced converts, and hold regular religious study sessions. Gradually, Islam was no longer something foreign to European society, but became a real part of everyday life. In the long run, history will record this event as a significant milestone in the growth of Islam in Europe. That thousands of Italian nuns, consciously abandoning their old ways, touched by a single verse of the Quran, is clear evidence that the truth cannot be hidden, and that light will, over time, continue to shine upon the hearts of those who seek it. That night, in an old convent on the outskirts of Florence, several nuns gathered quietly in a small prayer room. Dim candlelight illuminated their anxious faces. In the center of the circle, a nun named Sister Caterina opened a book she had just hidden under her robe. It was an Italian translation of the Quran. "Are you sure you want to hear it?" Caterina whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes," Sister Angela replied softly, her eyes full of curiosity. "I want to know what made Mary's heart change so much." Caterina then began to read softly. "Indeed, the only religion acceptable to Allah is Islam." Quran 3:19. As soon as those words were uttered, the room fell silent. Tears fell uncontrollably. Sister Angela covered her face with her hands, her chest trembling violently. I felt like God was speaking directly to me," she sobbed. The others joined in the sobbing. They felt the verse penetrate the walls of their hearts they had so tightly guarded. All the lengthy rituals they had performed over the years suddenly seemed insufficient. The verse seemed to answer their deepest spiritual longing. That night marked the beginning of a profound change. Silently, the nuns began reading the Quran every night, taking turns reciting the translation of each verse. They felt something different. Real peace, not just temporary solace. Finally, the courage arose. They decided to go to a mosque in Rome. With their faces covered with scarves to avoid recognition, they entered the women's prayer room. An imam greeted them warmly. "What are you looking for, my sisters?" the imam asked gently. We want to find the truth," Sister Caterina replied, fighting back tears. "And we believe that truth is found in Islam." One by one, they recited the Shahada. Their voices trembled, but their eyes shone with conviction. There is no God but Allah, and there is no Muhammadan Rasulullah. Tears of joy filled the room. The mosque congregation wept, witnessing a rare sight. Nuns once known for their strict adherence to the convent, now submitting lovingly to Allah. This news spreading from one convent to another. Thousands of other nuns were inspired. They followed in their footsteps, reading the Quran, meditating on its verses, and ultimately embracing Islam. This phenomenon became a massive wave that could not be stopped. On the streets of Italian cities, it is now common to see former nuns wearing headscarves, walking confidently. They no longer live in loneliness, but in the company of the Muslim community. They have found a new family, a sincere sisterhood, and a love born of faith. And beyond all this, they always remember that this great journey began with a single verse. One simple sentence that opened thousands of doors to hearts and changed the face of Italy forever. Over time, the phenomenon of thousands of Italian nuns converting to Islam began to be seen as a sign of the times. Many people who were previously skeptical of Islam began to open their eyes. They wondered, what made these nuns who had dedicated their entire lives suddenly abandon everything? And the answer always came back to one thing: Allah's guidance. These converted nuns now lived with new identities. They chose Islamic names as a sign of rebirth. Maria became Maryam, Katerina became Khadija, Angela became Aisha. Each name carried a meaning, as if confirming their spiritual journey. In mosques, they could be seen sitting in the front rows, eagerly learning to read the Quran, recite prayers, and study the Sharia. But what was most beautiful was the serenity they radiated. Their once gloomy faces were now radiant, filled with light. Many who saw them remarked, "There's something different about them. Their smiles are sincere, their eyes are peaceful, and their steps are light." This was clear proof of Allah's promise that anyone who is given guidance will have their heart filled with the light of faith. The profound impact continues to be felt. The younger generation of Italians, who had been living in a spiritual vacuum, began to be drawn to Islam. They saw the former nuns as role models. That truth is worth fighting for, even if it means going against the grain of tradition and facing rejection. This phenomenon also made the world aware that Islam is not just a religion, but a way of life that brings peace to anyone who sincerely accepts it. And most amazingly, it all started with just one verse, one simple sentence, yet it shook thousands of lives, uncovered the truth, and ignited a light that can never be extinguished. Therefore, this story serves as a lesson for us all. Guidance is a gift. It can come to anyone at any time and in ways we never expected. We just need to open our hearts, because when that light comes, there is no more doubt. At the end of their journey, the converted nuns always said with gratitude, "We have been searching for God all our lives, and finally we found him in Islam. Now we no longer feel alone, because God is always with us." Over time, this story became more than just news in Italy, but a global inspiration. Thousands of nuns who had once secluded themselves behind convent walls now opened a new chapter as Muslim women who felt close to God. They lived lives filled with faith, with radiant faces and hearts always at peace. For many, this was a sign that the light of Islam could not be contained. It penetrated the convent windows, penetrated the silent spaces that had long been filled with unanswered prayers, and finally found hearts sincerely seeking the truth. The world learned something important from this event: that humans can lose their way even though they live in ritual, and can feel empty even though they are surrounded by prayer. But when the Word of God touches the heart, all that emptiness disappears. Just one verse is enough to turn around the life of a person, even thousands at once. Today, these former nuns often advise their sisters around the world, never underestimate the verses of the Quran. Read them, reflect on them, and let your hearts hear them. For we are living witnesses that a single verse can change the course of our lives forever. This phenomenon will always be remembered as clear evidence of the power of guidance. And we as Muslims are called upon to love the Quran even more, draw closer to Allah, and safeguard the blessings of faith that have been bestowed upon us. So my brothers and sisters, reflect. If a single verse can shake the hearts of thousands of nuns in Italy, what about those of us born into Islam? Have we truly appreciated this light of guidance, or have we allowed it to fade away due to our negligence? My brothers and sisters, the story of thousands of Italian nuns who discovered the light of Islam through a single verse of the Quran is clear proof that Allah's guidance is real and knows no boundaries. It can come to anyone, whether a scientist, an artist, or even a nun who has dedicated her life to a convent. Their journey reminds us of one important thing: never be far from the Quran. In it are the answers to all questions, a light for darkened hearts, and a guide to the path of truth. If a single verse can shake thousands of souls, imagine what would happen if we truly embrace the entire contents of the Quran in our lives. So let us reflect together. Do we truly appreciate this blessing of Islam? Have we safeguarded the faith that Allah has entrusted to us since birth? Or have we allowed it to dim due to our own negligence? May this story serve as a reminder to us all to deepen our love for Allah, His Messenger, and His Holy Book. Because guidance is a gift, and whoever Allah wills will receive it, even if it is within the walls of the most secluded convent. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to share it so more people can reflect and learn from it. Your support by clicking the like, subscribe, and share buttons means a lot, so that stories of guidance like this can continue to spread, becoming a light for hearts still searching for the truth.